Yes.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. So today we're going to tell you about the court case called Cypress. I think it's Cypress, Fairbanks Independent School District versus Michael F. with Mercedes, Jennifer, Emily, myself, and Grace. And go to the next slide. I'll let you. Okay, perfect. All right. So this case was decided back in 1997. It was actually it's still important today because it shapes how schools are judged, and when it comes to providing services for students with disabilities, it kind of gives a good outline for that. So it deals with FAPE and the IDEA. So plaintiff plaintiff characteristics. Who was involved in this case? The plaintiffs were Michael F. and his parents. Michael was a middle schooler who struggled a lot with his behavior when talking about things like verbal and physical outburst, aggressions, defiances, and having a really hard time controlling his emotions at school. But he had a really average intelligence, so his teachers thought, with the right supports, he can still learn in a regular classroom. But Michael's parents didn't agree with that. They felt like the school wasn't doing enough to help him, especially with his behavior. So after trying a few IEPs that they thought were not working, they decided to pull him out of public school and place him in a private residential treatment center. Then they went to the school district and said, basically, we want you to pay for the private placement because the school didn't meet all of Michael's needs. Next slide. So that brings us to the main issue. Michael's parents said that the school's IEPs from October and November of 1993 were just not good enough, and they believed that the school failed to give him the behavioral support that he needed, which is why they had no choice but to place him in a private school. And on the other hand, the school district said, like, wait a minute, we actually did everything right. So they argued that the IEPs were created with the parents involved and that Michael was making progress both academically and behaviorally. So the parents and the school district ended up in a legal battle. And it started with a due process hearing, and then it went all the way up to the federal court. So that was kind of the background on the case and how everything got started. Now I'll pass it over to Grace so she can kind of explain the timeline and how it moved through the legal system. Yeah, I think I talked about that too. I just didn't say next slide. I think
You're
Grace,
okay.
or is that Grace?
Yeah, you're okay. I'll do this one.
Okay.
So, she kind of touched upon it, but the early decisions in the lower courts were at first, the TA hearing officer ruled in favor of the parents. They found that the district's IEP did not adequately address Michael's behavior. It produced low academic outcomes and it disrupted others' learning process. Went into the federal district court. They reversed the TA ruling and they sided with the school district. They found that the district's IEP was appropriate under IDA, and their evidence was behavior stabilization, academic improvement, and supportive services in his LRE. And then last, when it went to the district court, they affirmed, or the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, they affirmed the district court's decision, and they concluded that the IEP was reasonably calculated to provide educational benefit, meeting the IDA requirements. So now we're going to look at a timeline of the beginning to kind of how the case ends. In August 1993, Michael enrolled. He had an initial IEP, which included the LRE of the general education classroom. His parents did sign off on it. In September, Michael's behavior fluctuated a bit from mild classroom disruptions to little scuffles in class, but there was academic progress. In October, the ARD committee meeting was held to discuss his grades, although at the time they were passing. They also discussed his behaviors. Michael's parents were very unhappy with where he was behaviorally, and they altered Michael's IEP, placing him in adaptive behavior classes for math, English, and history, and then his parents approved. The following day, before anything was he was not in his new adjusted schedule. Michael got into a fight with one of his girls in his class, and he was removed, emergency removed for the day. October 7th, Michael began his new placement in his adaptive classes, and he still had behavior programs. Um, and October 26th, progress report was sent home, and Michael was failing in all but one class. November 4th, Michael's parents decided to remove him from school, and he was admitted into that treatment, like Emily touched upon, and then he remained there until February 11th of 1994, when his family could no longer afford it. In the next slide. So after they removed him, November 18th, the ARD rejected the public residential placement. And then April 94, the TA hearing process starts, and it lasts 11 days. They came to a conclusion on June 17th, and they ordered the reimbursement of Michael's stay at the treatment care facility. In December 12th of 1995, the district, or 1995, yeah, the district court issued findings reversing the TA, and then finally, on July 25th in 97, it was the ending date for the federal appellate level court.
Okay, I will go over this part. So the court holdings, so the Fifth Circuit Court ultimately ruled in favor of the school district. The court held that the IEPs were appropriate and met the standard established in the landmark Raleigh decision. According to Raleigh, IDEA requires that an IEP be reasonably calculated to enable the child to receive educational benefits, but it does not require the best or maximum possible education. Because Michael had made some academic progress and demonstrated improved behavior under the IEPs, the court found that the district had fulfilled its legal obligation under IDEA. The court's rationale, the court used a four-part test to evaluate whether Michael's IEPs were legally sufficient. They were individualized, so they met his unique needs. He was placed in the least restrictive environment that still supported his behavior. The school engaged in collaboration with specialists, educators, and his parents. And Michael demonstrated measurable benefits. He passed most of his classes and began managing his behavior more independently. While his behavioral issues were ongoing, the court concluded that his progress exceeded the minimal level and therefore satisfied IDEA's standard of meaningful educational benefits.
All right, I'm going to go over the reflection or the summary of this case. Did I skip over anybody or miss anybody on here before I jump in? Okay, just making sure. So in the reflection, this case really showed us how important documentation and collaboration are when it comes to IEPs. Even though Michael still had behavior issues, the school district had a solid plan to keep good records. And it showed that he was making progress and that it made a big difference in the court ruling, all that data. We realized that the schools don't have to create a perfect result, but they do need to show that they're making real efforts, tracking students' growth, and adjusting everything based on the data that they're receiving. Overall, this case reminded us that a well-documented team-based approach is essential for that. And I think I covered all that. It did come to the 4-point reminders that you can use for finding out if that IEP you're creating is covering the FAPE, and that checklist is very important too. What we are doing, I'm sorry, I'm moving all around trying to do things. Implementations of this for those handling cases or have a caseload or any involvement in this process, the key takeaways is that IEPs do not have to be perfect. And I think I said that already, and I'm sorry. So again, it does not have to be perfect. You have to have the student's well-being in mind, and you have to provide that you are doing those things to uphold that. And a generalized questions that you can ask yourself about, very easy, the 4 questions. I think that this case goes back to that quite a bit. Those four questions you can ask. And then for our references, we used a combination of primary legal sources and supplemental legal analysis to complete our research. The case decisions were from Justia and Fine Law, and we also included peer-reviewed articles and IDEA itself to help us do this. And that would conclude our research and everything on Cypress Fairbanks versus Michael F.